All right, I'm gonna teach you how to make a pompano rig, a surf fishing rig, beach fishing, chicken rig, a whole bunch of different names for it. But so it's really simple. You can buy them at the store and they come kind of like this. The cool thing about making your own rigs is you can customize them how you like them. So I'm gonna start by just disassembling this rig and then using the same pieces from it to customize my own rig. I disassembled the pompano rig or the beach fishing rig. Now I'm going to show you how to tie your own and go over some of the things that help when you're tying your rig. So the knot you're going to use to put the hook on is going to be called a dropper loop. I have a video just about the dropper loop and I can tag it in here, but I'll show you how to tie one right now. So you're just going to do a loop in the line. Typically if it's going to be the first one and this is where the sinker is going to go, then I would do it about at least 1.5 feet from the bottom, 2 feet, depending on what kind of fish you're targeting. Some fish are going to be feeding really close to the bottom, then you want your first dropper loop to be really close to the sinker. But if the fish are like mid-column fish, like a pompano, you might want it a little bit off the bottom. So I'm just going to start by doing a dropper's loop. So you're going to create a loop in your line, overhand knot, like this. Now you're going to form a second kind of loop in the line right here with your fingers, and then you're just going to wrap this. Depending on how thick your line is, on how many loops you're going to do. Okay. On really thick, heavy pound tests, like 130 pound tests for my halibut rigs, I only do 3 loops. For 20 pound tests, you can do 6 loops. So anywhere in between on the thickness of the line is good. So I did about 5 on that one. This is 50 pound test. Typical beach fishing rigs are gonna be between 20 and 30 pound tests. So now, you're at this point, you're just gonna pull it tight. Super simple. Go to the other video to get more detailed instructions on how to tie the dropper loop and then come back. This is gonna be really simple. So now you have a dropper's loop. Now the cool thing about tying your own pompano rigs or surf fishing rigs is that you can customize. Sometimes the fish want a bead on here or a float, and sometimes they don't want to float at all, you know? So it really depends on the bite. There we go. So sometimes you can use a float, sometimes you don't. Sometimes the fish do not want the float on there, so then you don't have to rig it with the float. This is what's cool about making your own surf fishing rigs. Another thing is, we used to use scale hooks mainly because that's what they sold on the rigs. But now we actually like to use these 2/0 circle hooks. And we'll just put a little circle hook on here instead, just because we can customize it because we're making our own rig. Use what's best for you, but this is what we use. So there you go. You don't need the bead on there, but sometimes we just fish with just a bead and no float, or no float and you know, just naked. It just depends on the bite really. And the fish will react differently to the bait depending on what color float you have. You could have a pink float, a white float. And so when surf fishing, you have to keep changing these out because sometimes the fish want something different. Sometimes the fish want fish bites or shrimp or sand fleas or clam, and they don't want anything else. So you have to keep adjusting your surf fishing rigs depending on what are biting. So here's the first hook. Another thing that's really cool about tying your own surf fishing rigs is you can, you know, typical surf fishing rig comes with 2 hooks. You could put 3 hooks on there. You could put 4, depending on what the regulations is for your state. Now, sometimes what I like to do is I'll put a float on the top hook, but not the bottom hook, just because I feel like it floats it up, and then the bottom hook's sitting there naked without any float or bead on there, and the fish react better to it. But that's just, you know, different presentation for different situations. but typically I have 2 floats on each one. So here's the first hook on your surf fishing rig. This is where the sinker is going to go. So we're going to tie on a spider hitch at the bottom here. One other cool thing that you can do with the spider hitch, I'm going to do it really close just for an example, but a lot of times what we do with the spider hitch where we connect our sinker on is, okay, so we'll do a typical spider hitch, just 1, 2, and through the hole. I'll do a whole video on, I have a whole video on the spider hitch, and I'll tag it in the description. And so, okay, so now I have the hook and where the sinker is going to go. Obviously this is really close just for you to see, but you can move this dropper loop as high up and down the line as you want to keep it away from the sinker. And it's as simple as, once you do this spider hitch like this, now you can just put the sinker on, and you can adjust the sinker however you want, whether you want a pyramid sinker or a bank sinker. It really just depends on the bottom you're fishing and how big the waves are, but you can adjust accordingly. So now you can put on a different weight, you can tie your hook farther from your sinker, all this by tying your own surf fishing rigs. It's super simple and it's awesome. I mean, this is the only way to do it. Another thing that we tend to do is when we are fishing, surf fishing, we like a shock leader. So we'll use 12-pound tests as our main line on our fishing reel, but it's so we can cast super far. But we're usually using super heavy weight, like, I mean, you know, from 3 ounces all the way up to 5, 6, 7 ounces. And that's a lot of weight for 12-pound tests on your running line. So for about 30 feet of line at least, we'll put 20 to 30-pound tests just to have that shock leader. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll just tie our leader right to the shock leader. Well, I mean, we'll tie our rig. A lot of times we'll just tie our rig right to the shock leader. So if we break off or something happens, we just continue to tie off that shock leader until it gets so short, we just put a whole new shock leader on there. And it makes it super easy to tie rigs basically straight onto your running line. So this is just a basic surf fishing rig. So you're gonna do a spider hitch at the bottom where you're gonna connect your sinker on. Then you're gonna do a dropper loop. Both knots are gonna be tagged in the description below, and I'll have written instructions on how to tie these. Also written instructions on how to tie the entire rig. But as easy as the customization of the actual surf fishing rig and everything, you need to start tying your own surf fishing rigs. There's no other way. I mean, if you're gonna be surf fishing a lot, especially for pompano, redfish, sheephead, you know, whiting, all that stuff, as long as if you're gonna be beach fishing, this is what you wanna be using, this kind of chicken rig. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps, and catch some fish.